Okay, Harvey.
Today is May 8, 2023, corresponds to Yud Chet ER 5783.
Thank you. Okay, so last week we started to talk about the Isser of Al Tifnu El Ha'elilim. That's the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. And Chazal say that it means that you should not be mistakel at something. So the Gemara on the bottom of the first page, the Gemara says that it means that Al Testachnu, it's referring to a diukna. Is the Ksav Ha'halech Tachas Satzura V'Tachas Hadiknios Aser L'Kros B'Shabbos U'Diknu Atzu Apachol Aser. The writing you're not allowed to read on Shabbos, but because of Gzera of Shtaros, but the object itself that the writing is under, you're not allowed to look at even during the week, because it says Al Tifnu El Ha'Igligim. So the question is, what is this Diyukna? The Diyukna is, Rashi says that it's an image of a person, because man is created in the Diyukon, the image of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But so there's a Machlokes Tosfos in Shabbos and Tosfos in Avodah Zarah. Tosfos in Shabbos holds that it's talking about a Diyukna that was made for Avodah Zarah. As the Tosfos says here on the bottom of the first page on the left, Diyukma Atzma Asar Af B'chol near the B'Shavi L'Shem Avodas Galil Mamar Avalonai Mutter. It's talking about that you made it for Avodah Zarah, but if you made it just for decorations, it's permissible. And Tosfos brings a raya from the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says that the children of I forgot who were holy, and they didn't look at the tzura of a coin. So which means that other people looked at the tzura of the coin. So why did they look at the tzura of the coin? So Tosfos says because there wasn't an avodah zarah. It was a coin has a image on it, so it might have an image of a king or whatever. So that's not people don't worship coins. They worship money, but not coins. So there it's permissible to see. There's no issue of Al Tifnu, but in our case, where it says that the Yukna Atzma was Aser, even B'chol, because of Al Tifnu, it's talking about where it was made for Avodah Zarah. Tosfos on the next page in Avodah Zarah seems to disagree, because Tosfos asks the steer in Sugyas. Tosfos says, why was it Amai Midis Chasidus Ikabazeh or Minan Yukna Atzma Aser L'Stakel Fil B'chol K'Tiksel Tifnu L'Gligim? Why does it say that the children of Rabbi Nachum, Rabbi Simoi, were Benan Shel Kedoshim, they were holy people. And the Gemara says they were holy because they didn't look at the Tzurasa de Zuzah. What made them holy? Nobody's allowed to look at the Tzur of Zuzah because it's Avodah Zarah. So Tosfos in Shabbos answered that it's talking about where it wasn't made for the sake of Avodah Zarah. The Tosfos in Avodah Zarah gives a different teretz. He says that on coins, it's not Avodah. It's not. There's no issue about Tifnu because it's a Tzura Sharaga Liros Batadar. You see it all the time, so therefore it doesn't sway you. So in Tosfos it implies that even if it wasn't made for the sake of Avodah Zarah, it was a coin. It's not made for Avodah Zarah. Nonetheless, there's an isser to look at. There would have been an isser to look at the image on a coin, if not for the fact that it's something that you see all the time. So what's the nature of that isser? So I showed you last week that the Ritva says because it takes by looking at pictures and images, it takes away your focus on the Rebbeinu Shalom. So L'maisa, according to Tosfos of Avodah Zarah, you can't look at any pictures. You can't go to a museum and look at paintings. And according to Tosfos in Shabbos, you could. And how do we paskin? So on page 4, the Magen Avraham brings the Machlokas on page 4 in Sifchat and Chaf Gimel in the Magen Avraham. It's like about 10 lines up. The Magen Avraham says Tosfos Varash Kosud after Yukna Hasig Shem Avodas Aliguma Over. According to Tosfos, the only issue to look at an image if it's for Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah Dafnun, but in Avodah Zarah, Mesechus Avodah Zarah, Kosud Tosfos feel B'chol Yukna Aser. El B'tzurasa the Zuzishar. Tosfos says the only time it's much to see an image if it's a coin, because it's Shiragal Lirospa. So how do we paskin? But Olam Nalgim Kisvar Rishona. The minig of the Olam is so the museums are saved. You're allowed to go to the how do you pronounce it? Louvre.
The Louvre.
Louvre. You're allowed to go if you're so inclined. You want to see the Mona Lisa, and you're Saimech on the first Shita in Tosis. Although the Mishnah Berurah says that there's some people who are Machmir. That's on the next page. He brings Shitas to the Machmir, but the Magen Avraham says the minig is to be Mako, and the Magen Avraham also says V'nugi Deriya Ba'al Mashtar Kuliyama, that if you're even where there is an Isser Staklus to look at Avodah Zarah, that's only if you're staring and you're penetrating gaze. But if it's just casual, you notice it there's no Isser. Okay, so now the question is, what's the story? We're going to a museum. So, according to if it's a statue of Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, the halacha, there's no problem. According to the Yesh Machmirim, there would be a problem. See, the Mishnah Berurah on page 5 says, Yesh Machmirim Gam Bazeh, in the Bir Halacha on the right side. He says, he quotes the Machlokas, the Tosas, and in Avodah Zarah and in Shabbos, and he says, Yesh Machmirim Gam Bazeh, Tosas and Avodah Zarah. He says, Yesh Machmirim. The Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, if you're Machmir, then you can't get the Horowitz Margaret and Haggados with the pictures of the people, because it's a diukum. But we don't. But Mikra then we hold it's mutter. So l'chora, if it's a statue of a person or something, or whatever it's a statue of, it's fine. But let's say it's an Avodah Zarah. Are you allowed to look at an idol? You might see it in a museum, or in Eretz Yisrael. They're all over the place. If I remember correctly, I went once to Banyas with my cousin, and I think there's idols. They preserve them because it's historical significance. And we know that from Tanakh that there were periods of time when the Jews were Oved Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael. So those were real, what we call getchkas. So what?
The Baal.
The Baal, yeah.
Worshiping the Baal for
the Baal and other idols.
Years.
So yeah, for centuries. So the question is, are you allowed to look at idols in a museum? That's if they have an African, some kind of thing that they do to dance around, or I was in Dominican Republic, which is connected to Haiti. In Haiti, they have these the voodoo doctors and everything. So are those things? Are you allowed to look at them or not? Is it included?
Oh yeah, but how about the one with the owls about Highland Park?
Oh well, that's you're not allowed to look at because it's disgusting. It's ugly. I never saw. I don't know why they made it into a.
I don't think the totem poles are Luzar. I think they're historical monuments.
Okay. If it is, it is. If it's not, it's not. But the question is something that is an avodah zarah. Are you allowed to look at it? And also, the Rambam on page 3 says that the Isser of Al Tifnu Al Lilam includes two things. It includes looking at the avodah zarah and also reading Sifrei Avodah Zarah. In page 3, near the top, Svarim Rabim Chibru Ovdei Kochavim Ba'avodasa. There are many Sfarim, even before the printing press. They had all sorts of how-to books, manuals. And even to look at the image is also also. And that's why the Torah says, you'll end up saying that what exactly how do we serve this avodah zarah? You're not supposed to inquire. You're not supposed to say pen tidrosh eicha yavdu. You're not supposed to say that. Human beings are very fickle, and it's very easy to sway them. So if you're going to end up looking in them, so you'll end up worshiping. And you'll say, I will also want to do it. I was once listening to a radio program. They were interviewing. There was this may be 40 years ago. I don't remember. There was some kid that came from India, and he was in a hotel in New York, and I don't remember, someplace, Texas or someplace, and whoever it was decided that he was a god. And the people were saying it's so amazing to be able to he was a 10-year-old kid. And they said it's so unbelievable to stand in God's presence and talk to him. And you know what's so interesting is he was born on 6/12/23, and he's staying in room 612. So like that was the proof that he's God. So people, they believe in all sorts of silly things. So it's very easy. Unfortunately, we're all that way. That we it's easy for us to. Some say that the reason why Haro saw B'Kukul Yazar Asim Yayin. Everybody asks why I didn't commit adultery. Why do I have to be? Because if you see a saita, it leaves an impression. If you see a woman or a man that committed adultery, so then it leaves a rishon. It's very easy to have an impression left. So that's the question. What about going to museum to see, or if you see it outside, or all over New York City? They got all these statues all over the place. In my email today, I said, well, there's the statue of Titan holding up the world in Rockefeller Center. There's a lot of places where you could see Avodah Zaras. So what's the status? So Ramesha has a tshuva as follows on page 6. Binyan echad sheparnasa liyos more bati sefer shemedina b'divri yimei hayuvanim v'haromim mimuta l'saper b'dasayim. Somebody who has a job in I assume a public school to teach history, and part of the history is to teach the religion of the Yevanim and the Romans, which was idolatrous, or the Greek mythology and all those things. So it was a tshuva to Rav Yehuda Parnas. Did we start this last week? We started just a little bit. He needed dvar echad sheparnas sasalios marva beis limud shel hamedina b'divrei yimei hayvanim v'romim v'tzarach gam lahagid shiurim binyani the same. He has to give classes. V'avodas aliyum yesh b'zeh iser dal tifnei aliyum. Probably in the regions you have to know Greek. I mean, I remember going to Greek mythology in high school. The Kavod Taraso Masber.
They don't even learn English these days. So.
The Kavod Taraso Masber Hasafim became because of Rambam. The Reparnas said that what's my suffix, whether it's mutter or not, because since the Rambam says Beparak Beis Me'Avodah Zara Iser Hakriya B'Svarim Shechiru B'Dik L'Chavim V'Avodas Mishum Shedavar Zegarim L'Ifanos Achareh. It's because you'll be easily swayed by reading the manuals, V'Lasos Kamo Shehemos, and you end up doing like they do. U'Bizman Hazeh Shedoz Seihem Kavar Me'usim L'Chol, assuming that it is, but Greek, probably Greek and Roman mythology, everybody knows is nonsense. And it's not currently being worshipped. Ein lesser. In other words, if it's an Indian god, it might be a Hindu god, then it would be probably a different story. When even asked the Shiloh, because then Charetz Pashut, if it's a Hindu god and people are worshiping it, so that's mamish the Yisur of Atifnu Elohim. They're not allowed to stare at them. If you pass by in your car or you're walking, you see it. So you just, as long as you don't concentrate on it or think or look at it, maybe you look at it for a moment or two, you're not over the Yisr. But if you're mistakil, which means to look at it more intently, so then you'll be over Nisr Deraisa. But if it's a Greek mythology or Roman mythology, Shema Akapanahu B'chal, so do you say that since nobody believes in it anymore, so you're not going to be swayed? And the Ram says the whole is because you might be swayed, or Shema Akapanahu B'chal Isser Afshein Atam. So Ramesh has a beautiful tshuva. Ramesh says Anachal Niyastaiti. So L'stakal B'tzur Shavod Zara Shehu Gamkein. So he didn't ask Rabbi Parnas. He didn't ask. He could have asked the same question. What'll be a statue that people don't worship anymore? If you go to the Banyas and you see the statue of the Baal, but nobody's worshiping those statues anymore. What is there an issue of Al Tifnu Al? So he says, Anir Lanis Tait, the Gustaka B'tzur Shavod Zara Shehu Gamkein. We go to the top the left now. Gamkein Mitzad Al Tifnu. The Isser of Al Tifnu applies to seeing a statue as well. Asur, it's Asur. Af Shaleka Tam, even though it's no longer going to sway you, and the Yisr of Al Tifnu, the Ram says, because you might be influenced. Ram says, Ramesh says, no, it's Asur anyway. Why? We hold that Ramesh says if an Isser, the Torah says an Isser, even if the Torah says a reason for the Isser, and the reason no longer applies, it's still Asur. So there's a famous Machlokas in Gemara, whether you're darish time of the kra. After shemin she darish time of the kra. It's machos shemin chacham. You darish time of the kra. So he Ramesh says that's only hurak. Shehu that shumi lefarish mitzad tam shlo nemer iser elbow open shika tam. The darish time of the kra means if the Torah says, he gives an example. The Torah says you're not allowed to hold on to a garment of an almana because since she has nothing else to sleep in at night, so you have to return it every night. If it's a ksus lager or a ksus yom, you return it in the daytime. So the Torah says the reason. So chachamim hold that even if she's not an almana, it's also we don't even the Torah says the reason, but we ain't darshan time of the crow. If you hold darshan time of the crow, we say the isser is limited to the case where there's a reason. So Ramesh says l'chara. If you hold like Rav Shimon, it's a big machok. Is how we pass it. Do we pass like Rav Shimon or Chachamim? Are you darish time of the crow? So l'chara, if you hold like Rav Shimon, this shayla, Rabbi Barnes is shayla. Whether it should be an isser avodah zara today should be totally on this shayla. Whether you're darish time of the crow, if you're darish time of the crow, so the whole reason why it's also is because you might be swayed. So if it's nonsense, you're not going to be swayed. So Ramesh says no, because the davar should never ha isser rak shenases man sheleka hatam gam Rav Shimon lo yutar kevin shekvar nesar. If it was forbidden because it fit into the category of the isser, the time was he might be swayed. So if there was an avodah zarah that would sway you, so at the time it was carved or whatever or minted, it was avodah zarah, and there's an isser of altifnu. So the Ramesh says once it's aser, it stays aser, even if the time goes away. The only time you say that the time is not applicable, it's not aser. That's if initially the reason that it should be aser didn't apply, so then it's never aser. But if initially it was aser, once it's aser, it stays aser. How does Ramesh know that? So Ramesh brings a raya. What?
I would actually say that's different than the modern statue of Titan in the Rockefeller Center. That was never built as an avodah.
You are
That was
1,000%
built as an art.
correct. That's what I was wanting to say. That's part of my shir. That's why I have another set of pages to show you. Ramesh says the same thing about stamps. Let's say there's a picture on a stamp. Ramesh has a shayla about if there's a cross on a stamp. So Ramesh says that according to Tosas in Shabbos, who says that if it's not made for avodah zarah, there's no isser. So a picture of an avodah zarah is there's no isser. There's no isser about tifnu. Maybe according to the other shita, so Ramesh should discuss what about according to the other Tosas. But you're 100% correct that you could definitely look at as much as you want the picture. It's a statue of Titan in Chayra in Rockefeller or any duplication is no isser. But Ramesh saying if it was in its time b'shaitai, you're 100% correct. If when they made it, it was an avodah zarah. Once an avodah zarah, always an avodah zarah. So Ramesh has to bring a raya for this chiddush. How does he know that? He says raya mishitas harambam b'perik yud beis avodah zarah she hakafas pa'asarosh shechas azakin that's mitam shekein derech ha'akum. The Rambam says in Hilchos Avodah Zarah that the reason why you're not allowed to cut off your payas and you're not allowed to use a razor is because it was the Derech HaAkam. It was like Chukos HaGoyim. Beis Yosef, B'simin Kuf Pei Alav Yordei Koser Shalom Nos and Tam B'daito El Midas HaKoser. Beis Yosef says it's based on Psukim. Umikol Makon Gam Rambam Sover Shadin Hu Olam. Nobody in the world would say that you're allowed to shave off your payas nowadays because it's no longer a Chukos HaGoyim. Af Sha'akam Ein Osin Kain. The law Kistam Chukas. So because once it's aser, it stays aser. That's what Ramesh is right. You see, once something was, if the Torah said it's aser at the time of giving the Torah, it was aser, so then it stays aser. We know that chukas ha'akam only applies if chukas ha'akam changes. So something that was chukas ha'akam, it's no longer chukas ha'akam. There's no isser chukas ha'akam. He says that's different. Ramesh says. The lokastam chukasakim kishakam pascal indicating leka iser. There's no iser chukasakim if the goyim stop following that tradition. Mechenu afa tur beiser ksuvas kaka vasrita v'gedida sheisur mishum chukasakim kedisa Okay, I you know. First, he's saying chukas. I think he explains it later. Chukas akum. The Torah doesn't say what is chukas akum. The Torah says you're not supposed to follow chukas. I forgot what pasuk you chukas say and we'll say leichum. So it's a general isser, but it doesn't specifically say what's usser. So then, if 1,000 years ago it was a chukas akum to wear red ribbons, so then it became chukas akum, but there was no absolute isser on that. But Masha'ain came when it came to the Torah says don't shave, don't cut your payas. There the Torah specified what the isser is. Once it's usser, it stays usser. The Torah says that tattoos, the Torah says it's also because chukas hakum. We call masur mu'olam. After should pass hakum lasisken. I mean nowadays they still do it, but even if they would stop, it would still be also. Alma the cave and should doram ego also Torah beferish. If the Torah specifies what the Isser is, af shehu b'shvil also tam atzmo, even though the Torah tells you the reason, the stam chukas hakum, it's because of chukas hakum. Mikom kol lo toi hadin batam shismatu kishav zman shloy yatam. The din is not totally in the reason. El the b'shvil hatam shloy oz also Torah olam. Because the reason is why the Torah made it usher. But once it's usher, it stays usher. After kisbat tam kem shel kapanim hayzeh be'isr. And it's different than normal chukas hakim. She'll never isa al davar. Normally chukas hakim, the Torah doesn't specify what's called chukas hakim. El amashu chok hakim. Torah just says if it's something that non-Jewish custom or a religious non-Jewish custom, so then you can't do it. The chen came to pasuk hakim usai kain harain zeshuv b'chlal iser came to chok hakim shebol hay iser v'letzim davar. In chukas hakim. The isser is that it's chukas hakim. It's not the etzim thing that's usher, because at the time of giving the Torah, it wasn't the chukas hakim. But those things on them Yisrael etzim adavar, kamosh goes b'Torah. But when it comes to cutting your payas or the altifnu alilim, the Torah says that it's usher to look at the statue. B'zeh shehaya chol hakim hu rak l'tam al isser. The fact that the Torah says a reason is only, that's why it became Asr. Shulchan Eina Osa she's batal hadin afshin is batal tam b'meshech hazan. It could be that I mean, what's the logic of this? If the Torah says it's Asr because al tifnu, because it's going to sway you, so why should it be Asr when in a later time when it's no longer swaying you? So it could be it has to do with the Gemara says there's a print that if Bezdin makes a takana. Once they make a takana, even if the reason for the takana goes away, the takana stays at the Gemara and Beya, and the Gemara learns it out from Bimshal Chayovel Hemiyal B'Chor that God said you shouldn't go on. I forget the lashon pasuk. Al tigu. You shouldn't go up on the mountain. Al sigo boyad, and but whatever the rest. What is it? Okay, so the Gemara says, why does it have to say B'Mishal Chayovel? The only reason why it's also because the Shekhinah was there. Once the Shekhinah went away, why do you have to have a special pasuk? The Gemara says because the Davar should be minyan, tzarich minyan achar atiro, and the concept is that it's really finding a havdil in the secular world. It's the same thing. If there's a law on the books, and they made the law for a certain reason, and then let's say they say you can't. I give the example. If a person is driving in the Sahara Desert, or where the Sahara is not in America, but wherever. But if you're in Nevada, you're driving in the desert, and there's no cars for 200 miles, not a soul. And there's for some reason they put up a traffic light there, and you're driving along, you don't feel like stopping for the traffic light, so you go through the light, and then as soon as you go through it, there's this policeman standing behind the light, and he zooms up with his police car and the siren, and he arrests you, or he gives you a ticket. So you say, officer, the whole reason why you're supposed to stop for traffic lights is because it's dangerous, so that people could cross, or so there shouldn't be accidents. There's no car here in 200 miles. Doesn't matter. That's the law. You can't decide on your own. That otherwise it would be hefker. It would be chaos. If every time you'll come up with a million reasons, this halacha doesn't apply this week. So the same thing, I would say that it's the same concept here. That once the Torah said it's usher, al tifna ligam, that it's usher to either to read manuals of Avodah Zarah or to look at Avodah Zarahs, so then it doesn't matter that the reason why it's usher is no longer applicable. So he says, okay, we're about 7 lines from the end of this paragraph. And he says the same thing is true about Avodah Zarahs. That even though nobody's worshiping these idols anymore, you have these images that they worshipped 2,000 years ago. So nonetheless, the Isser Istakas Mitzvah Avodah Zarah, the Torah said you're not allowed. There's an Isser to look at the Avodah Zarah. Kedama Afshe Tamud Kasar Rambam. Even though the reason is Kadesh Lo Yifna Lasos Kamasayim, that you shouldn't be swayed. Umash because Mishra Mash Mosakra Mikol Kol Murak Tam Ladin L'chein Afshe Nasas Man Shagatam on this Bat Isser. So Ramesh is very clear that you have to be very. I mean, really, people should know. Should be told that there's such halacha that if you go to a museum, if it's like Simcha said, if it's just a replica, so there's no problem. But if it's a real getchka, then you're not allowed to look at it. You should be very. You could be over Nisa Deraisa, especially you look at it, you study it, you look at the texture and the color and the movement, whatever you say about the statues. So, but there's an Issa, according to Ramesha, there's an Issa Deraisa.
Is the Rambam paskin like Rabbi Shimon?
It's a machlokes in the paskin, how we paskin.
Because Moshe was supposed to be, seemed like he was supposed to be proving that even according to Rabbi Shimon, this would be the case.
You mean, what's the raya? Maybe the Rambam doesn't paskin like Rabbi Shimon.
Yeah.
So then, I hear.
Well, if it doesn't
So
have Rabbi Shimon then you don't have. You don't care about the time, then it's a soul regardless.
Then it's usher anyway.
But he started off by saying even according to Rabbi Shimon, this is Aser, Varayala.
Okay, I hear. I don't know. It's not clear how the Rambam paskins. I hear what you're saying. You say, but okay,
I
but
would actually say that darshan time of the Kur is not equivalent to this. But to me, darshan time of the Kur is like saying, like Shlomo HaMelech tried saying, the reason why a king can't have extra horses, etc., because they will let us stray. That's he's going by the reason. He's not, and the Torah says the reason for that. Over here, I would actually make the distinction. There's an absolute issa against Avodah Zarah. Now, why does the Torah have to write you shouldn't buy two Getchka on top of it? There's an issa already. So I think in this case, the Torah is actually saying, the reason I'm giving you this tzivui is because you see the other people doing it. And similarly,
why? What's that again? There's an
the
Isser
reason
and
I'm writing it specifically is because you see all your
what?
neighbors
No,
doing
why'd you
it.
say that there's an Isser anyway? Why is it?
Avodah Zarah.
There's
An
Isser.
absolute
There's an Isser to
absolute-
worship Avodah Zarah,
Right.
but looking at it is not worshiping. Looking at it, you're not worshiping
Yeah,
it.
but I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is, the Issa is absolute even for this. And the time of Dekur is not the time of Dekur in this case. It's a reason for why the Torah is writing it.
That's what Ramesh is saying. But
Because you see other people doing it. Similar as an absolute Issa against the tattoo.
yes,
and
that's
against cutting your hair.
that's exactly what
Why
Ramesh
is
is
the
saying.
Torah writing it? Because you see the Goyim doing it. You go into Canaan, you'll see everybody running around like this. Don't copy them.
Okay.
That's not the reason for the.
Okay, that's what Ramesh is saying. But David's asking that Ramesh is bringing a raya from the halacha of that the Yisr of cutting your payas is still usher, because even though it was because of Chukas Goyim, according to Rav Shimon, why?
What I'm trying to say, it's different. You're not. The Issa isn't because you're copying the Goyim. The Issa is there, and that's an additional consideration. The case of the Almona, for instance. The time of the Kur he's trying to darshan is because you're going to give her a bad reputation, and therefore, it's only for Almona. So over there, he's actually saying that Tzibur is only for that reason, and it's not an explanation of
Right.
why
Okay.
some
All right.
cases
That's in
it's
line with
different.
what Ramesh is saying. Yeah. All right. Let's see the next paragraph. V'lechein im l'kro. So l'chayra. L'chayra, Rabbi Parnas is in big trouble. לכן גם לקרוא בספרים שחיברו בעבודה זרה, יש לאסור אף שנאמר שבטל הטעם בזמן הזה. To study the religious customs of ancient the Greeks, it should be also. Even though בזמן הזה כבר נמסו דעותיהם בעולם, their way of thinking is already considered obscure or even worse. Avol nira pasha she'isur hu rak b'svar. Now, but now Ramesh says Avol nira pasha. Ramesh says nonetheless. Nira pasha she'isur hu rak b'svar shekibro akum shavim avodah. The isur is only if the manual, the avodah zarah for dummies, if it's being written by an obed avodah zarah, then there's a problem. They write it in order to tell you what's great about something that's foolish. They think that it's good. If the Romans wrote a book, a manual, so then for you to read it is also olam. Africa Yishbat Hatam. Shlo Yimshuchu Bnei Adam B'Divrei Tipshim. Our svarim is Chabro Miko from Avodah Zarah. But if it was written by somebody who doesn't believe in Avodah Zarah, Shehu Rak L'Hisklotzes Bahem U'Avosam, and he's writing it to show how foolish it is to ridicule. B'meshem misaprim havlosam ushtusam unless then if somebody would 2,000 years ago would write a book about the Greek mythology and say, guess what these crazy Greeks think, so there would be mutter to read it, because it's not it's putting it into a light that nobody would be swayed by it. See the gam bekroish misaprim be'avodosam. The Torah many times describes how they do the avodah zaras. Avakem shub open shuhu vazos ul hislotzeitz ein klum. V'kol shekain she'ein lesser ata mashaloh yasaraz. If even then it would be mutter, so then there'll be no isser today as well. V'imkein kishitzarch lilmod behakors shalo in yoni dasayim v'avleim. So that being the case, if you want to teach Greek mythology, you should tell the students that look, these are silly things. It was nonsense. A person even with a little bit of intelligence would think that it's ridiculous. You're allowed to make litzanas out of avodah zarah. Uvofsen zemuter. It could be it's also beneficial that you should study Greek mythology. Sheyaven mizeh she'af ata yesh kama dvarim she'af shemachzikim harbi b'nei adam shehem be'emes havalim v'divrei shtos v'ein lechas achar dvarim shemachzikim af rov ha'olam b'neinayim stumos. Just like they followed things that were ridiculous, so today also the world is blinded by certain things, and everybody does it. But that doesn't mean the fact that everybody does it doesn't mean that it's good. There were millions of people. We can't even stand it. It's only the Jewish people that were a very small nation. They always understood the truth. They gave up their life. They were ma'aser nefesh, not to be obed of Zara. Everybody made fun of them. Well, you don't believe in this getchka uvazos, and they humiliated them. So if that's what you want to bring out, so that's the teacher. That's a big mitzvah. The efsher yivinu shigamata who came. V'afsher ba'da engon aludrosh b'fnei umus olam v'davar v'dvar datam. Ramesha, you see how sensitive he was. Don't tell the Goyim that their religion is foolish. You shouldn't tell that to the Goyim. Why? Mitzad Shalom HaMedina, because you're going to create anti-Semitism. The chesed that we're living in a country, B'Shalom V'Shabbat, where we have peace and we have freedom. V'anu mitzuyim mitzuvim lispal b'shlomo. There's a mitzvah to mispalo for the country, the host country in which we live, that they should have peace. Mikom lidrosh al havloes ha'amim hakadmonim u'davar tov. She always tells me, but to teach about the avodah zaras of ancient history, that has a value, and therefore it's permissible to do so. So that's what Moshe says. That if you want to, if you have to teach mythology or any other religion, if it's not being practiced anymore, and you're teaching it in a way that you're showing how foolish it is, so then the Yisur of Al Tifnu El Elim does not apply. So now I don't understand this tshuva, because why does it matter? According to Moshe, once it's asur, it's asur even if the reason for the Yisur doesn't apply. So why don't we say that there's an Isser of Al Tifnu El Elim that the Rambam says that you're not allowed to read Sifrei Avodah Zarah. So why don't we say that Isser should apply even if the reason doesn't apply? Once it's asur, it's asur. Torah says specifically, just like by the Ramesha says that by Payas, that even though Torah says the reason has to do with Chukas HaGoyim, but once the Torah said it's asur, it stays asur, even though the reason for the Yisur is not there. The reason for the Yisur is not there, but nonetheless it's asur, because it's an absolute Yisur. If the Torah says there's an Isser, even though the Torah says the reason for the Isser is this and that, but we say the Isser is absolute. So why isn't reading books about Avodah Zarah, why isn't that an absolute Isser? Why does it matter?
Because I believe that it goes to what he said earlier, which is that even in the case of Almanah, where it only applies to that it only applies to Aniyah in that case, because the original construct was such that lo tachbor beged almanat aniyah. Here too, the original construct was you're not allowed to read books that portray avodah zarah in this light.
Right. Right.
It never applied. It never applied to anything that was disparaging of the original avodah zarah to begin with.
Right, because the Isser is to read something which causes you to be pona, which that's inherent in the Yisur.
Right.
That the Yisur is something that's going to cause you, that's going to sway you. You're not allowed to do. So you're not allowed to look at it legally. You're not allowed to read the books. But if at the time that the book was written, it won't sway you, so then it never was included in the Yisur. The same way. If at the time that the Avodah Zarah was created, nobody believed in it, so there would be no Isser to look at it.
But you have that in Sanhedrin already, the notion that the Avodah Zarah, you have to serve it in its style. If you, Macaulay said something,
So if you throw rocks at it now,
Exactly.
you think it's disparaging, but that's the way they're
That's
horrible.
what their
That's a
avodah.
problem also.
Yeah, but that was
so
their
that's
avodah.
I'm saying where
Yeah.
I think Ramesh is heading, if you read a book now, it's more like reading a novel. So if your attitude is you can't read fiction, you have a different problem. But at this point, when it's no longer a practiced religion, it's a work of fiction. So it says Zeus instead of some made-up name that the novelist would write. Like Harry Potter books. Okay, it's magic, it's...
Right.
Hopefully
Everybody
you're not
knows that it's
calling
nonsense.
Fiction is okay, then...
Hopefully you're not calling Harry Potter Avodah Zarah, hopefully.
I know, I said
Wow.
fiction is okay.
Because all my
I'm
kids
giving you
read
an
those
analogy.
books 1,000 times.
No, I'm not calling it Avodah Zarah. I'm
On the
saying-
contrary, the Ramesh's Tshuva would allow you to read those types of books.
Correct.
Right.
Now, I would say that one could argue on Ramesh's psak and say that the Ramesh says that once something is asur, it stays asur.
Correct.
So, but I would argue that the perhaps the nature of the Isser is al tifnu el Elim. It doesn't say in the Torah that you shouldn't look at an elul. It says al tifnu el Elim. So that means you shouldn't look at something that's going to sway you. So maybe if right now it doesn't sway you, so maybe the Isser of Tifnu doesn't apply. Ramesh is saying that the Torah Aser is looking at there's Isser Stakus at a idol. So once there's Isser Stakus, and at the time it was an idol. So the time it was made, it was an idol. So the time it was made, it was an idol. So it was Aser to be Stakus. Once it was a once Aser, it always stays Aser. But I'm saying that maybe it's only Aser. It's not Isser to look at idols. It's an Isser to be Mistakel. The same way the Torah doesn't say that you shouldn't read books about Avodah Zarah. It says, what's the main shot in Al Tifnu? Is the main shot in Al Tifnu, does it mean not to read books, or does it mean not to look at the idol? I would think that the Pashup shot in Al Tifnu is to look at the Al Tifnu Al Lilim.
Wouldn't even be to look. Even that is a secondary from the. Even that would be secondary to actually following them.
Right, a
If you
tifnu,
turn- if you
tifnu is
turn
different
into
than
them,
just
it's
looking
really-
at it. Looking
yeah.
at it is not al tifnu.
Right. It's to literally to turn one's body towards it.
To be
And
swayed.
to be
See, I-
swayed to the.
I may make another point. Why is it that only Histakos is Aser? The Magen Avraham says that if you just momentarily look at it, it's mutter. Why is it mutter? If there's an absolute Isser to look at an idol, so what does it matter that
Because
you?
it's tied to lo tifnu.
Because sometimes you do by accident. You're walking around
Okay,
there.
so-
how
Okay.
can you avoid that? So you see, you look away. So
Yeah,
it
but
shouldn't be in
that's
a favor.
you're saying it's Unitas, but it's not, the Magen Avraham is not mashma because you're Unitas. He says it's as long as you're not mistaka. Mistaka always means
Looking.
the look with intent, intensely. So why is it not Aser? Because it's not al tifnu. So so then you see that if it's a stakus that doesn't if it's a look, Torah doesn't say you have to be mistakel. Torah just says al tifnu. So that means inherent in the Yisr is that you shouldn't look in a way that sways you. So by the same token, if it's no longer swaying you, just like you could look for okay, so I guess Ramesh will say that the Isser it never was to look momentarily because momentarily you'll never be swayed. But the Isser of being mistakel already was chal on the getchka. So once the Isser was chal on the getchka, so once it's there, it stays
No,
there, even though it has no influence on you anymore.
I would ask you a question a different way. Say if the Isser is looking at an Avodah Zarah, and something that was an Avodah Zarah 2,000 years ago was no longer an Avodah Zarah.
But that gets into the question of how
Oh,
what is bitul avodah zarah.
That's an excellent question. What about if the avodah zarah is batal? If you could be
Well,
mevatel
that's-
avodah zarah. With all this whole discussion that Moshe has, would it apply to if you're mevatel avodah zarah?
Yeah, but these are not. They're not. Nobody's Avodah.
So I'm not an expert in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, but I would start to look a little bit. I mean, first of all, there's a Jew can't be mevatel Avodah Zarah. Only a guy can mevatel Avodah Zarah, and so it could be so the Avodah Zarahs in Eretz Yisrael, they're all Jewish Avodah Zarahs, except that maybe there were periods of time where they belonged to a guy, but I don't know. I don't know the halacha.
So, Jew can be, so he's saying an Avodah Zarah that the Jew invented can never be batal.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
That's what the Jew
Broken
owns.
or Yom Tov.
That a Jew owns himself. He can no longer claim that it's no longer an avodah zarah. While a goy can by either statement or action, basically
By cutting off an
arm.
or cutting off an ear or anything.
Right.
So it's an issue of the thing itself. Having this, it has this. Yeah, all right. So
You
that's-
can't be mevatel. So, but let's say, but the avodas, if it comes from, if it's a Hindu statue that they no longer worship, or some other statue. So, but let's say, or let's say a Greek statue they no longer worship. So you'll say that you're allowed to look at it because they're mevatel the avodas. It came from Rome, so they were. But who said they were mevatel it? I mean, what did they do?
But see, I guess
Most of the statues were not worshipped.
yeah, they were just.
Well, I don't know if they have to worship, but if they believed that they had magical powers, they were
godlike
avodah zaras.
Right. God of the sea, the God of this, the God of that.
Why?
But not the statues. They did.
Well,
I mean, they didn't believe that the statues were incarnate in its
No,
different.
they thought they were the image of Zeus, who was whatever.
That's very interesting. I mean, there is such a thing as an avodah zarah.
Yes,
But that doesn't mean that's what that was.
So what the because in Greek avodah zarah worship they didn't worship the statue, they worshiped the god who was represented by the statue.
and also most of the statues you see are not of the gods. And so, for instance, Titan is not an interesting example because Titan is not a god. He was a giant. He was like Ogmer Havashan. He was
That's also
Hercules and Titan.
that's also a very good point. That maybe does avodah zarah mean that dafka
be a god.
it's a represents, let's say, somebody with magical powers? Does that, like, what do you need to qualify it to be a god? What's the sheer?
I don't know. I don't know.
At what point do you become a god? I don't know. So these are very good questions. I didn't
Now,
have
the
any.
Rambam, according to some people, they believe that he honestly believed that Islam was not about Zarah.
He says.
Right, he says that. He
He said
says
so.
that beferish.
Yeah, that's
The
because
reason I'm qualifying that is
Because he
a
lived under
question
them.
that challenged the authenticity of the Igeres Hashmat, the Muslim Entertainment. They think somebody tampered with it.
Could be.
to make it sound
Okay, we don't know.
authentic. That's the only reason I'm saying
Okay.
it.
Mm.
But then you see that considering Muhammad the prophet doesn't make it about Zarah.
I think the Rambam says that if the guy who lived in the country abandoned the avodah zarah, that's called bittul. But it's only if they abandon it on their own. But if they abandon it because they were chased out of the country, so then it's not called bittul. I don't know. So these are all very good questions. I looked high and low to find somebody besides Ramesha that talks about looking at idols, and I couldn't find any discussion about it. I was very surprised. So, right, these issues definitely play l'chora. If the avodah zarah is batal, there should be no isser. The question is, at what point is it? If you go to a museum and you see some African statue, do we say that it's batal? I don't know.
Well, if
Talking about the
it
Greeks.
needs an
Talking about the Greeks.
act of bittul, then.
Yeah, so but let's say it's missing something. I don't know.
Oh, okay, so.
But maybe it's only if it's done to a shame bittul. I don't know. I don't know the halachas.
Well, that's what the Muslims did in Europe. That's why in Europe, many of the Greek and Roman statues you see have no noses.
Right.
There's
Right,
actually
took
a
'em off,
museum. in-
Really? They
Levatel,
did it to
yes.
Vatal?
Yeah.
They went with hammers and smashed up.
Okay, they-
In
didn't believe you had
Afghanistan,
Surah.
they destroyed some
Right.
of
Yeah, that's
Buddha.
right.
That's
Buddha,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So in the British Museum, they actually have a room, a collection of only noses.
Because these
That they
Muslims
found.
kill, destroy everybody. It's not just
Muslims are very
Buddha,
stark.
they kill us too,
But,
so.
Do you have access to any Shalas Chuvas from London Besdin?
I have access to around 120,000 Jews.
No, this one would be brand new. So, but for the coronation?
Oh, for the
Moshe
coronation.
stayed in the palace
Yeah,
for Shabbos.
Right, where he put him up.
And the
Right.
story says he actually asked whether London Besdin, whether he's got a header to go to Westminster Abbey inside on Shabbos. And they did.
But that Westminster answer is a different problem. It's a church.
I know.
So church is a
That's
separate
what I
issue.
said, that's why I would like to.
So
see-
what?
I would
What
like
they?
to
So
see
what
the
they
two.
say that he could?
The Besdin,
They
he
said
said, the
he could.
story goes, the Besdin says he could go in.
Isn't that the same? A
had
few
that
years ago,
before.
in one of the shulim that you gave, there was a shula of Avodah Yosef going to
Back going into church.
about yeah.
There was a tshuva about we talked about non-Jewish music. So the Ravad Yosef said that in Rome, he quoted a tshuva that in Rome they would go listen to the church music, but I don't think they went. They stood behind the
They stood
church.
behind- Yeah, yeah.
That's what he said. Is that they stood behind the church.
And
They adapted the church. So they liked this music,
No, no,
and then they adapted it.
yeah.
But I don't think they went into the
No,
church.
but this is something. This was the context was when when a Jew is allowed to dress in the manner of non-Jews if he's kov lemalchut.
And have a haircut that way also.
Right.
The Gemara talks about
Yeah.
that.
The Gemara
It
talks
says
that way,
that
but
they
there
can.
was specific tshuva that
Yeah.
had to. I think it had to do with the funeral. Because
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
in Cairo. That ended up having to deal with a similar
Yeah,
issue.
yeah,
Okay, your memory's better than mine.
yeah.
I don't remember. Okay, anyway, I'm just raising this as I would love to see somebody else discuss it. I think the Chara is, you could argue it. I'm just throwing it out that you could argue with Ramosh saying that even though Ramosh says that that once it's usher, it's usher always, if the Torah specifies the Isser, so that by removing the payas, it's a Losakifu Pasur Osham. So even though the Torah says a reason, but there's an absolute Isser on removing payas, but it could be that if the Torah says Al Tifno Alilim, the essence of the Isser is that you're not allowed to look at it in a way that will sway you. That's built in, that you can't say it's already usher, because it was never usher if it doesn't sway you. That's
an inherent part of the
that's
Yisr.
the hard part of the Isser.
That's the distinction I was trying to make, but I don't know how to tell you when the Torah means which. That in one case it's an absolute.
No, because
and the Torah is saying,
yeah, but the
"Why am I writing
reason why it's different is because by Losakifu, the word Losakifu doesn't have anything to do with the reason. It just says don't cut off your payas. So the Torah says don't cut it off because it's chukas hagoyim. But Losakifu means don't cut off your payas.
Right.
But Atifnu means don't be swayed. It doesn't mean, if the Torah would say al tistako be'alilim, so then it would be correct that once the Torah says al tistako, even if the reason is because you'll be ponez, and then the reason goes away, it'd still be usher. But here the issue is al tifnu. And that's not being a raya from the fact that re'iyah is mutter. The Magen Avraham says it's only if you're mistakel. Well, it doesn't say in al tifnu. It doesn't say after mistakel, but it's not called al tifnu. So that's what I said. I was hoping to find somebody else that maybe would argue this point, but I didn't. Maybe somebody could find something on this. I looked. I couldn't find anything.
Pressure Weiss doesn't deal with it.
We now have Rav Asher Weiss printed the Minchas Asher with a mafteach, which is gavaldik, and Ephraim Gertzberg took it upon himself to distribute them to shuls across America, and he gave me a copy with the mafteach. I wish I had it 10 years ago. I wouldn't have had to prepare any shiurim. I could have just every week do another Minchas Asher. I didn't even have his farm altogether. I mean, I could have accessed them, I guess. But I don't know. I'm throwing it out to you. That if it says al tifnu, so maybe the whole isser, the same way Rav Moshe says that if somebody's presenting Greek mythology as nonsense, there's no al tifnu because that's, in essence, it's not the Yisr. So maybe even if there once was an idol, but now it's not an idol, so it's not called al tifnu.
Moshe didn't exactly address what you're allowed to read. He sort of skipped that and went straight to what the teacher is supposed to say. But how is the teacher supposed to find out his facts?
That's a good question. I'll ask you another question. Are you allowed to read the New Testament? That's another question.
In Greek or in English?
In whatever language you want to read it. What there are people that are experts in the New Testament.
Right.
What's the heter to read the New
That
Testament?
seems like it would be
To defend
potentially a
us
problem.
when we're attacked by.
So
Yeah, but
so what's the nature?
Well,
Why does that become mutter?
Depends which parts you mean, by the way, also. Because there are parts of the New Testament that were part of the Septuagint. Because the Swarm we took out.
We're not talking
So,
about that.
like,
We're talking
so
about the
the-
real.
Yeah, but there are people
St.
that are
Paul, St.
experts
Peter, it's a good
in the
question.
whole thing. So what's the heter? And the I mean the Rambam in Mar Nevuchim quotes a lot of but I don't know if there's Sifrei Avodah Zarah, but he.
Well, to answer that question, that is nothing mavine in Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin had to know what Avodah Zarah was, had to know what the chukim is, because then otherwise, how do you judge? A person comes and says, "We have two instances."
Right. How did they know?
How do you know this is
how do they
there?
know?
Maybe that's only the heter for the Sanhedrin, but not for the. Let's say a common person wants to look at right.
So maybe it's the same. Maybe it's the same heter, like Ramosha says, that if you're reading it, just like if you're teaching it to make fun of it, so if you're reading it for the purpose of showing how it's wrong, so then it's not included in al tifnu because you're not.
Although that's not exactly what he said, right? He said that he said you can make fun of it, and he said that you can read something written by someone who's making fun of it.
Yeah,
He
but
didn't say you can read the originals where they're
order.
praising the Avodah Zarah in order to make fun of it.
Right.
I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying he didn't say that.
right. So the Ramesh, the same Sfar, the Ramesh says once it's usher, it stays usher. So if it's a sefer of Avodah Zarah, Okay, I don't know. These are all very good questions.
Every time you go to a hotel, you can open up your drawer and you find a King
but
James
Not
Bible.
anymore, by the way. Not anymore.
Or the, what do you call it?
Doesn't
What-
explain-
Every single time you go, it's so annoying.
What was the
The-
Mormons?
the most
So
famous
annoying.
parts,
You go to
Jack,
a hotel, it's in
explain
every drawer.
how to practice Christianity. They tell the story.
I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe through reading the stories, you would be,
yeah,
you would
that,
be,
I
you
would
be
think
swayed.
that that's
You would,
yeah. If it's
or
an
you'd
issue,
want to find out
Yeah,
more. You'd be,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. No, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying.
If you read
it's
about him
different
walking
than-
on water or doing stuff like that, you know, then you might
yeah.
Although
you want to learn a little bit more.
Although you could just have a guy who walks on water and isn't a god.
All right, I'm just
Shout out to the
raising it for your. Let's. We only have 4 minutes. I'll just show you. The Ramesh is true on the top of the page of this booklet. Imutar l'schar bestamps shal medino sheyesh stamps shemitzur aleim shasi v'arav v'komrim. There's pictures of crosses and
Praise God.
and priests. He says, "Mashishol maus kavod lebeachas mischaro hu limkar stamps le'elu ha'ovim lekabel stamps." Chomadi stamp collectors. V'yesh medina shemitzyarim al stamps komrim v'shasi v'erev shalem. Imutar l'schar, you're allowed to sell them and buy them. Meaning the estate enus the heim rak hatzuro shal matvet. This was Simcha's distinction before. It's just a picture of a cross. Ketzura she'al matvet shekos v'tos rosh b'Shabbos u'diyuknei mutar k'damash Rav Nachman Suni shekaro lei b'nan shel kedosh mishum d'loi mistak v'tzur sheduzuzah b'chal da'achrini of mistak v'kos v'atam mishum d'rak b'shavi l'shem avodas giluim maser amar shasar stak b'avu kishanas l'shem l'oi mutar. Tosa says that if you made the tzura not for avodah zarah, it's mutar. But I mean, tam zeh she'ach after tzura shal stamps shlo nas elonoi l'simin kamal amadved. It's like coins that have images on them. So they have images which are copies of avodah zarah, but they're not avodah zarah. And he says, "Vayin tosus of avodah zarah shekosu tam acher behet staks mabeya the kemish ragul but total goshai." He's going to say that even according to Tosus, it says that they had to look at coins is because it's your ruggle. So he says the same thing would be with stamps, that your ruggle to look at them, so therefore they wouldn't be usher. Then the next paragraph, I'm just skipping because we got to have a married minute. The Gamul Baroli Shiyeh B'chal Iser Ustakel B'Shesir Hashem the Yosef Not the Shleki Iser Kavan She'eno Avodah Zarah Atzma Sholem was that the cross is not. They don't worship the cross. It's just something that is a symbol of the importance of, or symbolizes what it's all about. It would maybe only be, it's a mechur, it's not appropriate. But if it's just a stamp, you don't even have to be machmer. Tzuras komim yesham. Look about tzuras malach mishar nashim. She'ain ovdin tzuras komim. There's no isser to have pictures of galachim on stamps. L'chein eira shum isser b'misar azat. Then the next paragraph he says v'yeshal tam gadol b'stamp shari nasub ofen shemivazin is tzuras. The whole it's not something that has special status, because the malachos post, the post office, they stand. I always tell the story that I visited my cousins in England about 50 years ago, and there was a letter on the table and had a stamp with the picture of the Queen of England, and I picked it up to look at it, and then I put it down and I turned it over. So my 6-year-old cousin said, "We wouldn't do that to the Queen." That's like if you want to know what Malchus is, even a little girl, I don't know if they would still say that in England. Everything gets trashed nowadays. But anyway, so that's what my stamps is. That's what Simcha Svara Mamish did. So if it's a copy, there's no issue. Okay, so we left some open-ended questions. So if you find anything, please let me know. I was going to get to the topic about Chassam Sofer. We'll do that next week.
Kaya.
Thank you.
Thank you.